All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As always, your host, Brandon, my co-host, Nick and Dan, and we've got the Tweedsmeister here because, well, you know what it is. Keep, Sell, Loan 2023. Woo, Dan, this might be the biggest keep, sell, loan we have ever done.
Look, we'll move through some names pretty swiftly because there's some general consensus on a few keeps. There's a general consensus on a few sales, Nick, but it's almost like a holiday on the London is Blue calendar. It is a high holiday for us when we come together and assemble as a group to enjoy the Keep Sell Loan experience together with ourselves, with Joe, and with our London is Blue community.
That is correct. Yeah, this is like Shark Week during the summer. Like everyone's pumped for it, and we're hovering below the surface. Ready to maybe chomp a couple. But this is a really fun one. We've had thousands and thousands and thousands of votes on these polls on Twitter. So if you participated in this, thank you so much. Like, I remember the first couple of years we did this, we'd get like 50 votes and everything would be super close together. With a big sample size like this, guys, it's been really awesome to see where the majority of people are leaning in any certain direction. And there were not very many polls that were like super tight together. So very, very pleased about that. And we have our own takes. And I think to set the stage, Joe, to give you a second intro here, we are very excited because at the end of this, we're trying to build a squad, right? This is not just ruthless, I don't want this person at the club. The goal is at the end of it to have a squad that you think can compete in the Premier League next season, because that is the competition that we're in mostly. So, thoughts, Joe?
Yeah. I mean, I think normally I try and throw in the occasional comedic throw in the trash is sort of my fourth category that I try and bring into these every now and then. But I think given the volume of players we have, and I think for context, I think we've got a 28-page script in terms of all the info and all the ins and outs and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. But that foundation, the squad that we're going to have for next season, obviously reduced competitions, potentially reduced minutes for the whole squad. How that is constructed is going to be very, very key. And I think going through the document that we put together, it's going to be quite interesting in terms of where those massive gaps are going to be for us to reinforce either internally or to go into the market. So I'm looking forward to getting into this. Should be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Nick, with the heavy caveat of being able to compete in the Premier League with this squad. So let's see how it shakes out. Good thing we have a small army of recruiters, scouters, and directors at the club. So kicking it in, we got to lay out what we want to do, especially if it's your first time doing KSL with us. We've got the three options. Obviously, Joe said he's going to try to sneak some in, but we keep, sell, loan, right? Players that we want to keep in the squad. No, they definitely are going to contribute. Sell, the time has run its course, and it's just a good time to split direction between us and players. Or maybe loan, hey, they've got a high potential, right? They're just not ready, but we want to keep them in because we rate them very highly. So the key with the loan, though, is now Premier League clubs can't register more than 2 at any one time. So it definitely is being more complicated in the Emanalo days of the loan army. The maximum number of loans you can have is 4. Like I said, 2 players at each club. And, when you get into the Premier League, you can't loan to another Premier League that they have acquired in the same window. It's getting complicated, Dan. Why can't we just, continue to mess up the rules and have a loan army? They don't like it, but, we could get into different countries and different leagues and things like that. But there are restrictions. We should leave it as.
Yeah, previously you've been able to loan 3 players into Premier League clubs, so there's already 1 spot less there. And so I think that is going to change the shape of our argument a bit, where there might be a desire to move on and kind of move some of those players who previously would have been in that loan category into a sale category. And I think we like to indicate to people that it takes place over 3 groups. So we mush the goalkeepers and defenders defense as one unit. That includes anybody who's classified as a wingback. Lewis Hall is just an amorphous blob, and he exists across multiple parameters. So we'll see where he ends up. But we do have midfielders and then attackers as a group. So that includes forwards, wingers, and attacking mids. And you may be asking yourself, do Chelsea actually have attackers? Yes, we do. And we'll get through that as we get into the list. But that's kind of the... Yeah, they're attackers. Whether or not they score goals, that's a different question.
All right. Well, again, assumptions are Nkuku's done, so we'll just kind of play with that in mind. The rest of it with Ugarte and things like that, we we're recording as of June 4th. So it is what it is. We'll take the rosters and move forward. And we'll kick it off at the top. And when I say top, I mean most important, right? Players of mass value, importance, like the quarterback of a soccer team, goalkeepers. So number one, we've got Kepa, bit of a lightning rod. The people said 67% sell. Dan, on your choice, it seems like you align.
Look, it's not that Kepa hasn't done great work getting Castrol's goal save of the season that just got announced on the Premier League website right before we started recording this. Not also to discount the fact that at times this season he was performing well and above his expected goals saves, above what he should have conceded. It's just a matter of, it is a position where if you could upgrade on the market, and there are some names that Chelsea have been linked with, Nick, that I would move on Kepa this window if possible. It's still going to be difficult. It's not a tricky move, and most likely, I think, to kind of your point, you might need to keep him just due to the economics of the situation.
Yeah, I think we've talked about goalkeepers, and then I'll obviously merge into the Mendy conversation next because they're inextricably linked together, right? Whatever happens with one affects the other. I don't think he's a number one. I haven't ever thought that he's a number one. He played, I think, relatively well this season, and I think that shouldn't be discounted. So I would try and sell if you can, but his wage structure, as all of our journalist friends have told us, is a problem. So if you cannot sell him and end up selling someone else, then I would keep him as a number two, a veteran experience backup number two. I just don't think you can win a Premier League with Kepa as your goalkeeper is my main problem. Not that we're anywhere close to winning the Premier League, by the way, Brandon, but that's kind of my premise.
So, Joe, the hierarchy here is that we have not only we have an inverse on wages versus on-field performances with, I think, all of our goalkeepers between Kepa and Mendy. The problem is the club had made such a gaffe with the way they structured Kepa's contract and wages that I think we're stuck with him. I don't think you can move him. And so because of that, instead of like maybe selling at massive, like crazy losses or like loan and subsidizing his wages, kind of like what we've done with Lukaku, to me, it just seems like you keep him and you look to move Mendy because he's got some value there. I know you're more on the financial side of it. How do you see Kepa from your perspective, maybe from that angle?
Yeah, I mean, he is the poster child for this, and I appreciate certainly in terms of the old regime he came in, but this long contracts, amortized transfer fees over a significant period of time approach that we're taking now, he is the poster child for what happens when that goes wrong. And I think certainly, obviously, the players who have come in under the new regime are certainly on less wages than Kepa, but it makes somebody like him incredibly difficult to shift from a financial perspective. I think he's probably got about 20 million pounds left on the books in terms of that, I guess, that sort of aspect of it. So anything
it's
over
amazing,
that,
by the way. Like that much money is still left.
Yeah, which is absolutely incredible, obviously, in terms of what's left on there. So having that and then the wages, the aspect of it as well. I think if you can sell him, I think that, for me, the experiment has come to an end. Even this season, I think his performances have been decent at times. I think when the expected Kepas outweigh kind of the sort of the performance we've seen, the post-shot expected goals went up slightly, but then kind of, I guess, regressed to the expected Kepa norm, which unfortunately, there are better people who are analysing goalkeepers than I have will point out fundamental flaws in technique and all this sort of stuff there. So I would sell on that aspect, but to the point of a squad composition, that does leave you with an enormous gap to fill, because I think Mendy as well is something that I would also be looking to move on. So it is tricky. I do like Nick's idea in terms of potentially keeping on as a number two. It would obviously be a difficult, I guess, issue in terms of bringing in a top quality number one on wages with a transfer fee, etc. Would complicate it a tiny bit, but this is the situation we find ourselves in, unfortunately.
Right. No one is saying he's number one worthy. I'm now looking, as we move to Mendy, to say there's value there. His contract is up. He's in a movable position because he was on low wages. So here's where the club did good work, right? You picked Mendy out of Ligue 1. We all know his story of how he's a late bloomer to being a professional. Loftus-Cheek, Czech involved in this. They got him, in a great spot financially. It hasn't worked out. So now it is someone that he does have value. You can move on. He's got the frame. And in 87% of the people in the poll said sell. this is where I'm at with Mendy. Is I probably would prefer to have Mendy over Kepa, but from a financials and an ability, if you can, there's talks with Onana and Inter Milan, but if you can use Mendy in a deal to upgrade to a number one, that's, I feel like, is most realistic. So that's the move I'm looking to make. It seems like a lot of us are on the same page. So I guess any change, which just sucks, man. I like Mendy. Like, he had the most unreal 6 months of his career that we'll never forget.
It was storybook, right? I think all of us remember him and his family up on the stage with the Champions League trophy. All of them are 6'9" and above. It feels
Massive
like
family.
This is just an unbelievable group of people. And yeah, I think this one has some heart to it, that we truly appreciate what he did while he was at the club. He gave us one of the best nights of our life, and it's just unfortunate that there have been so many changeovers and so many different styles of play in the last year, let alone 2 years, that he might not be the best fit for where we're going. So it's with a heartfelt thank you that we say goodbye.
Huge thank you before we get to, I think, the next keeper, which was, interestingly enough, was the surefire, yes, let's keep him, in Marcus Bettinelli, who is just, at this point, the third choice goalkeeper. I mean, I don't understand those, maybe those who have put in, 23% of people said sell, 4% of people, 5% of people said loan. Those things are not happening, because, Joe, this is just a scenario of the player being a quota situation. He's English, so that's a +1 in that category for a third choice keeper, who most likely will not see any minutes over the course of next season. He's just there as a vibes guy.
Locker room guy, loves a latte. He's just there to keep the momentum going.
It's the greatest job a professional footballer can have. If you're a Premier League player who, has come off of, a career of whatever sort of magnitude, but you look at Hilario, you're on maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 grand a week at a push for, X number of years, sort of at the end of your career. You're a vibes guy. You are someone who's good in the dressing room. I hear anecdotally he's an incredible person to be around and very good for morale and what has been a difficult season. Obviously has a lot of experience, a lot of information to pass on to younger keepers, but it's a no-brainer. He ticks an English quota box. He's probably on incredibly low wages in comparison to the rest of the squad, and I think from a personality standpoint, somebody who I hear from various people that is generally just a very, very good guy, and I think probably an absolute no-brainer just to keep him there as long as possible. And I think, yeah, if you're a goalkeeper at the end of your career, what better position to be in than maybe you might play 5 minutes in a cup game or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think certainly something that we want to keep around, both from a culture standpoint in the squad, but also just because it financially makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah. Again, I think didn't I got caught out for saying he's older and he's younger than Mendy.
Yeah,
but
he feels like the Rob Green type. He's at the end of his career when he's younger than we are.
Yeah, got to win a trophy for bets at this point. Just so, look, that would be a phenomenal arm race. Let's go,
Rob Green, the Baku hero.
That's right.
All right, Gaga Slonina came in the winter, only played 8 matches after his loan to Chicago Fire finished up. From his perspective, he's one for the future, right? He was playing in the MLS week in, week out as an 18-year-old. That just is you asterisk him as an anomaly, and you take a punt on them. That's exactly what they've done. He's played mainly in the dev squad, Nick. I mean, this guy, all you want for him are games. Yep. Get him experience. So we all were clean sweep on the loan.
Yeah, it's we're not the clean sweep because Dan wants to keep him. I'm somewhere in the middle, right? I think if you are guaranteed that he is going to play a full season, and I'm talking 30 plus matches full season, because that's what he needs, then you loan him, right? You go get him that experience, whether it's at the championship level or whatever, right? Some equivalent. Maybe it's France. Joe knows France a lot better than we do in terms of the league construction and what would be required in that scenario. But if you're not going to get that, then I think he is the number 2 at Chelsea. I think he could be that good. Your conversations with Phil have kind of turned me on this, Brandon, where I think it's, this is not a normal 19, 20-year-old. This is a 20-year-old that has immense potential. He's obviously killing it with the U.S. at the Under-20 World Cup right now. Has not given up a goal to this point, knock on wood that he doesn't today. But this is a player that I think could be a future number one at Chelsea if he is allowed to develop properly. And I think that is something that we have to be really cognizant of, Dan, as we look at where he goes.
Yeah, the reason why I said keep, and again, this goes back to the squad composition, right? So if I'm selling Mendy, if I'm selling Kepa, I kind of need a number 2 in some capacity. Bettinelli, like I'm already at the point where I'm down a goalkeeper, right? I've got 2 keepers I'm keeping in Slanina and Bettinelli. I need a third keeper on the team who really would be the first choice keeper. And this is a scenario where everything would tell you that he's on the right trajectory, and alone, to your point, 30 plus matches makes a ton of sense. If he doesn't get that, I would rather he be with the squad, develop with Pochettino, build a relationship there, all depending upon the age and profile of the keeper that we are looking to bring in. Because if they're anywhere within a 5 to 7 year range bracket, it's probably better to send him on loan and find another person as a second choice.
Look, my last caveat is, and I've had this in my own career, it is far better to go down levels and play than be at the top level and not play. As goalkeepers, you have to play. Nothing translates that experience from training to games. It is so different than field players. So that's my only hedge on that, is that like he absolutely has to play. And that's why when I say loan, the assumption is that he's going to get games. But Tweeds, you love an American in the squad. So, I mean,
I do actually, to be fair. I think the easy comparison for me, this is a potential Thibaut Courtois kind of signing. He is young, incredibly talented, precociously gifted kind of young goalkeeper who is performing well above expectations, has a lot of talent. You make sure that your loans for him, the way that you develop him, puts him in positions where he is going to be exposed to the best quality football, where he's going to play the most amount of games. And then you hope that he has that sort of transition where he goes from being a very promising young player to somebody like Courtois, who, 22, 23, 24, whatever age that's going to be, that he can come back, and it may be even sooner, given that we don't have a Petr Cech in goal at this point in time. It may be sooner than that. Maybe after a season he comes back and takes the shirt. But you're looking at him as that level of talent, and hopefully he can come back and assert himself as a number one. But completely concur. Everything that I hear from both Phil and pretty much anyone else who knows goalkeeping tells me that he is a very rare talent. And you're just hoping now that we can develop him in such a way that he comes back as an incredibly cost-effective solution to the number one jersey. And somebody who is potentially a bedrock of this new spine that we're trying to put together.
Absolutely. So that rounds out our goalkeepers. Again, let us know. Follow up with us what you think. I think there's a lot of shaking and moving that's going to be going on in this bucket. And who knows, maybe Gaga falls into a hell of a position if things don't break the way that we might want them to. So we'll see. All right, defender time. Easy one here, right? Easy one here. Reece James. All right, we're all keeping. Let's not be silly. The only question is he captain or not at this point? But Wax Puttock, Tweeds, Reece James, all we need from him is health, right? And maybe the second person on this list, if we can get him some depth and support, that just gives him the extra cover that he needs. Because I think we stretched him a couple times this season.
Yeah, and I think probably I've said this a few times, but I'm very comfortable sort of saying it. I think if Reece can stay fit or find a solution to manage his minutes, manage his workload, I think you're looking at somebody who's got the potential to be one of Chelsea's greatest ever players in terms of ability. Already won a Champions League. Now we're hoping that we can get back competing for Premier League titles. But he is of that bracket where he could have a legendary and historic career at Chelsea. But it will come down to his ability to remain fit. Whether that is as a wing back, whether that is maybe trying to see if he can play a bit of right centre back a bit more to take some of sort of the up and down aspect of his game away. But obviously feeds into how well Malo Gusto actually adapts to the Premier League, how easy and how seamless he can fit into what Pochettino is trying to do, whether that's at right back or right wing back. But Reece is the easiest of the keeps to me, and I think in terms of potential captain, I would personally give him the armband, give him the responsibility from next season.
If Mason doesn't resign, he's captain for me. I think you have to start a new generation, right, and a new form of leadership. See if he's ready for that, right? I think it's not a small job, and it's not as easy as just putting the armband on and assuming superpowers. There were 0.5 of people who wanted to loan Reece James. I'd explain yourselves.
The bots, they're bots. They have to be.
Explain yourselves. Yeah, I think the health thing is the biggest concern at this point in his career. he's not finished a full season since he was at Wigan. And I think that's
he's a big boy, Nick, as well. That's the one thing is he's not built like a footballer. He's built more like a sort of mini running back, or he's got that very thick build. He's a bit more like a rugby player in the UK. So I think it's going to be a little bit like Ruben. We saw that kind of body shape change a bit. Yeah. I don't know if Reece is going to have a similar thing in pre-season, but maybe
worries me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's the nature of his role, that up and down. The capacity that he has to get up and down is going to be affected by the amount of weight he carries in terms of muscle mass and that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping that he can get into a position where he's probably leans out a tiny bit and hopefully can take some of the stress off of what are kind of, as you say, getting to be quite critical injuries at this point in his career.
Well, the answer to that solution might be our next one, Malo Gusto. And look, Dan, with almost 97% of people saying keep, I think, like, aren't we forced into this? Like, of course we
can't.
Like,
we can't move him.
It's the underwriting the injury policy against Reece James. That's what Malo Gusto is at this point. And look, he did finish the very tail end of the season coming to Chelsea, getting a little bit of rehab, I think very late in April. So, this was one of the deals in the winter window. Got done, goes back on loan to Lyon, but will be heading here after playing 19 matches, so a little less than he played, or 19 starts rather, 21 matches played, a little less than what he played in the prior season. So just an opportunity for us to, again, get some additional talent in the side, someone who was more of an attacker previously, became a right wing back, and I guess the question really is going to just be around positionally, how good of a fit is he going to be now if we move to a back four under Pochettino, but 96, almost 97% of people, just like with Reece, said keep him. 2.3% of people said loan him again. I don't think that is the reality.
Okay.
So welcome, Malo Gusto, to the Chelsea side next season.
Yeah, absolutely. It, seems to be a lot of high praise for him. So let's see. Again, it's about the adjustment. Aspie made it from Ligue 1 to Chelsea, and that's what we have next. Aspie. And 87.1% want to sell him. And I would just caveat, Nick, Mr. Sispilicueta, we would like to sell him with love.
100%. Yeah, I mean, the rumors of him leaving last season were pretty strong. Obviously, he signs the 2-year deal. I think part of the reason why he signs the 2-year deal is so that at some point Chelsea could get a minimal amount of value back in some sort of transfer, just because now he has 1 year left on his deal, right, instead of 0. We have him as sell. I think the league is a tough physical league now, and there were times at which he struggled to kind of fill that role that he had done previously. Again, I believe as Stamford Bridge gets remade in the coming years, that he and many others, the sort of statues outside of the bridge, like he is that much of a legend and should not be understated. But sell with love is the consensus here, and genuinely do appreciate his time at Chelsea.
He gets the gift basket on the way out. That's the difference. Yeah. He gets a gift basket.
Absolute legend, right? And there's no argument about that. And so we just, season's over now. Hopefully we can do enough justice for him when he goes. But, when you look at the depth, Reece and Malo, like, he's not going to get minutes. Let him find another move. Thiago Silva's next. Look, he did the 1-year extension. Tweeds, as we start to move into center backs, I'm trying to look at this. We have so many young
tough.
We have so many young up and comers. He's 38, turning 39 this fall. I don't know what to do. Like, again, a lot of love for this guy. Do we need the experience if we have so many young center backs? I mean, Fofana, if Levi Colwill comes in, Batty Shield's still young. Obviously, Koulibaly's the only other old head in the squad in defense.
Yeah, I think that last sort of, I guess, portion there in terms of experience is the only reason necessary that you would keep him around if there is going to be sort of a kind of substantial like knowledge transfer between Silva and the rest of the team. I think fundamentally, though, if you're looking at Pochettino's style of football, if you're looking at where the Premier League is trending, can you play a 38, whatever he's going to be in terms of that age, in the middle of a back three, particularly when Colwill, Fofana, Badiashile are incredible athletes, and that would allow you to, if you're playing a back three or in a back two, play that high aggressive line, play a bit more aggressive, a bit more expansive in terms of how you're playing. It's a tricky one because I think he's been maybe, in the last couple of seasons, the one person who has had world-class performances and has had, that kind of leadership ability and stability and brought a lot of quality to the team, I just think now, as we look to the future, would you rather spend it seeing if there is a partnership between, part of this sort of young group of centre backs we have, what that partnership in a two is, what it might be in a three? Do you want to focus more on that, building into potentially or hopefully a return to Champions League football, or spend another season where Thiago Silva is an incredibly sort of experienced sort of sticky plaster over what is going to be possibly a quite, well, it could be a fairly turbulent time if those young centre backs don't kind of gel, if the experience is lacking in games. So it's a little bit of a hedge in terms of keeping around. I think giving him that opportunity to ride off into the sunset as well, giving him his flowers, and whether that's a return to Brazil or whatever that looks like. But I would prefer certainly to focus on that younger group of centre halves that we have, seeing what we have there and seeing what that looks like in a three or in a back four, and sort of moving from there.
Dan, is Fluminense a potential escape clause to this situation?
Look, it's the one that gets brought up every time there's a talk about a return to Brazil. We've seen all of the stories about how his kids are happy at the academy, that he doesn't necessarily want to leave. They want to fulfill his contract. And look, if he ends up staying around, no one is going to complain. I think the knock-on effect to potentially the season beyond, so a +1 scenario of like what happens in the 2024-2025 season and how you've had to potentially, Levi Colwell, Wes Fofana, Benoit Badiashile. Like, I think there's one coming up also that is the senior player that I don't think we can move on. So in this scenario, it's more of just this feels like a good parting opportunity for both sides to help us truly refresh, truly take that step. And yes, you're losing a ton in terms of institutional understanding of how to play the game if you see Thiago Silva disappear out of this Chelsea side. But also, maybe we need that to happen.
I think it's a bridge too far from a transition standpoint. And frankly, if he wants to stay, that's the end of it. Like, for me, like, he gets to call his shot at this point of his career. And I understand how you guys are framing your argument for your squad compositions. If Thiago Silva says, I'm at Chelsea and I want to play for Mauricio Pochettino, and I maybe want to play a little bit less this year, but I'm going to help get these other young cats into shape, good enough for me. We don't have to talk about it anymore.
So Koulibaly, the other experienced center back that we do have, with 75% to sell, I think I see that, everyone wants to sell. I just go back to, if I'm trying to play director of football here, how? I mean, you're going to take massive losses. He's on huge wages. I don't think anyone else is going to match his wages. Is he going to agree to a somewhere to move? I don't see it. And Dan, you're trying to get sneaky here and say maybe loan with an option to buy or something like that. I think this is where, like, as fans, we would just like to be, boom, cut dry, see ya. But as like the business side of the club, I don't know. I think I think this is Boli's learning curve mistake, right? On the wages and the contract he put Koulibaly on just to get it done.
Hey, you usually accuse me of a couple landmines on the script, and unfortunately, those are just the structures of the deals we agreed to last summer that are going to be in here as we think about keep, sell, loan. Koulibaly is one, I agree, and this is what influences my Thiago Silva opinion. I would rather you keep Thiago Silva as that fifth center back in the side if you can move on Koulibaly. I don't think you're going to be able to move on Koulibaly, so I would then look to try to loan him and keep Thiago Silva. And if you can't, then I'm probably trying to see about maybe the Thiago Silva out and keep Koulibaly as the fifth choice if that is just, unfortunately, there's no market for him.
I think you have to try and move him on. And it's not really... This isn't like some of the other ones that we're going to come across where it's like a clear talent gap that needs to be filled, because I think he did end up playing okay after kind of a rough start. I think it's just, if you want Levi Colwell to play, if you want Badiashile to play, if you want Wes Fofana to play, you can't have Koulibaly standing in front of them. And I think a loan is probably the most easily done sort of move here, Joe. But I know you want to try and sell him if you can.
Yeah, I think. I'm just sort of digesting what you were saying there in terms of keeping around. I think from where I was with him coming into the club, I think I had expectations for him to at least be a sort of a good to sort of very good player for us. And I think, to your point, his performances did kind of settle a bit towards the end of the season. But I think when you look at potential physical decline. You look at, I just think at times in the Premier League, the game transitions, the way that the game moves, at times his inability to just sort his body positioning and feet out for me did not inspire a huge level of confidence that he is going to be anything more than just like a good-ish at best sort of player for us. And I think, I think a lot of my decisions in this KSL have been based around using this season as almost a fresh start. Get rid of players that are not going to be part of that sort of 2-3 year plan.
Yeah.
And then I think, as you say, having him here will definitely limit the opportunities for a Colwill, or Badiashile, or Fofana, or even a Trevor Chalobah in this instance, in somebody that I would prefer to keep around. So, I think in that aspect, selling him is what I would like to do. I think the loan is probably the most obvious option, potentially back to Napoli or back to Italy, where I think his physical traits will still be of incredible value. Just think in the Premier League, that physical edge that I was expecting him to bring just didn't materialise. And I think, the rashness of the challenges, I think the stupid free kicks that he concedes, and just there are loads of sort of tiny, kind of some of the not tiny sort of details, but loads of details around his game, which I don't think are going to improve over time. And I would rather see Colwill or Badiashile or Fofana or Chalobah play and get those opportunities. And if there is an experienced head, then it has to be Silverstein to sort of marshal that young group of players.
Yep. Yet we got ourselves in this situation with wages and contracts. We'll have to see how it shakes up. Malang Sarr is our next one. 93% saying sell. And again, there's no animosity here. It's just, it didn't work. He's recovering from surgery after his loan with Monaco. I mean, Nick, it's like, hey, thank you. Like, he's young. You've got a future. It's just not with Chelsea. Au revoir.
Yeah, au revoir is correct. I use the word toodles in the script. I think, a 6 foot left-sided center back, when you have Badiashile and Colwill coming back in, you just won't see time, and that's okay. I think a loan back to or sell back to Ligue 1 is probably the best fit for everybody. I know he played it in Portugal for a season as well. So somewhere like that is probably the best case scenario for him.
You can sell him Malang Sarr. It won't be for much, but he's young. He's got experience in top leagues. I feel like you can move him, which is pretty easy. So
the surgery thing is kind of like, it depends on how he comes back, right? I think that's the only caveat.
It's just a matter of making sure that it's something that he can agree to from like a wage standpoint. I mean, he's not on a insignificant amount of money because he did come in as a free transfer. So that's probably the one thing to consider. But ultimately, yes, this is one where less attention on more players out there so that you can really hone in on great loans for the players that you do have and do see a future for. That, I think, is what is shaping this conversation, not just about Malang Sarr, with the 93% people who said he should leave, Brandon, but also with players like Ethan Ampadu.
Great transition. Joe, I'm just going to cut to the chase with Amps. 63% want to sell him. There's still 26.5% that want to keep him, 10% on loan. We've talked about him for so long. He's been in Italy the last couple seasons. I think he's just needs to be released so he can figure out I guess I should clarify. Figure out what he wants to do, but you still see a path for Ethan, don't you?
Yeah, I need Jake to insert the "let him cook" meme at this point, just so that I can set the tone here. I had a look at the potential outgoings, particularly on midfield area, and I think when I did the everybody who's been linked with a move away kind of question, not that everybody will go, we had about 4 players left in midfield I was looking at. So, anybody who hasn't been tangibly linked to some sort of semi-serious move away, I have a last-ditch hope just to see, in terms of players that I would want to put next to Enzo Fernandez, not for a season, just to see if there's something there, is a midfielder who can tackle and win the ball, etc., etc. If there is any opportunity to repurpose a player coming back from loan, Ampadu, I know he's been playing a lot of centre-back and all that sort of stuff, but that midfield aggression that we miss, putting him next to Enzo and just seeing if there's anything there. If not, you could probably even part ways in January. But I've always been a bit of an Ethan truther, and I've always kind of felt that he had something to add to this squad. And I do think, we miss tons of bite in midfield and ability to just win the ball and win duels and win physical clashes with people. And I think that is something that he can bring. So I'm kind of keeping with a caveat that if he's not making an impact until January, then part ways and let him sort of get on with his career. But I would like to see what Pochettino can do with him, because he is the sort of player that, he made Eric Dyer look like a serviceable player at times. So Ampadu, I think, has got a bit of a better base than Dyer does. So I'm seeing if there's anything there to sort of repurpose. And I guess to Nick's point, when I was sort of putting my squad together, I had about one midfielder left, so I have to have somebody there for the purpose of the start of the season.
Yeah, I'm kind of there. Like, if we put him in the defender category because he's mostly played there and thereabouts, right? But obviously him in midfield has been tried before too, so he's kind of a tweener in that regard. The only caveat to selling him, because I think it's probably the right time to sell, is if Poch does want to try him in preseason, maybe there is that January move that you talked about, Joe, that could be right. But I think if you've loaned a player more than 3 times, just sell him for the love of God, please.
All right. Well, again, I'll be interested to see, but to me, it's just kind of like, let him do his thing. Let him find his feet, find a home, and move. Wes Fofana, easy enough. Keep. I always said this. I didn't know how good he was going to be when he came in. Ollie Glanville continued to tell me, pull your head out of your ass. He is phenomenal. I fell in love with Wes Fofana this season. Would anyone? I mean, we got 97% keep. This is unanimous as it gets. I'm excited. And when you think about the squad composition and the defenders as well, Dan, we've got a lot of left-sided defenders on this team. He actually is a bit of a unicorn. It's just really him and Trevo on the right side, really.
Look, this is an easy one. It's a slam dunk. Just keep him. He's on a long contract. We paid a fair amount of money for him. He's a younger talent. I think the only question people have is probably his bounce back after injury and kind of injury setback this season. But again, that was a lot of players in this side. And so I don't think we want to paint with as broad a brush about the injury situation, not just for West, but also the next one in Betty Shield too.
I also, just on West, I think Joe has mentioned this, so I'm going to make sure to get this in. A fit Reece James, a fit West Fofana, and some sort of serviceable right-sided midfielder, whether it's N'Golo Kante or pick a person, is a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun on that side that can happen with their sheer athleticism, let alone the passing patterns that started to develop when they were all fit and healthy. So just one to look out for. I think he has a lot of work to do to kind of win me over as much as he's won over Brandon per se, but it's one that I'm definitely excited to see. But I think I might be more excited for Batty Shield personally.
Joe, have we really gotten your take on Big Batty so far? I know you've obviously done the Tinkerman stuff like that, but if you're anything like the fans out there, 98% keep. A lot of people have liked what they've seen, even though some managers have taken the crazy step of not playing him a few different times this season.
I think for the money we paid for him, he could be one of the best purchases we've made in a very long time. I think it's phenomenal. I think, if we're looking at putting him into a team that has hopefully a bit of a better ability to cover the defenders, not necessarily leaving them on islands sort of during the game, but a guy who I think has shown ability to do everything that you would want a modern centre back to do. And yes, I completely agree that both him and Fofana and all of the young players we have definitely need to make the leap over sort of the summer and into early parts of next season. But as a foundational piece, great switches of play, ability to carry the ball into midfield, just a very good defender first and foremost. I think he's been a sensational signing, and I'm hoping that he can kick on. And I want to sort of focus people on Pep Guardiola's comments about the change of sort of mentality his team has kind of undergone this season to kick on even further than what people kind of thought they were possible. And he sort of kind of attributes it to essentially the ability to win duels, the defenders. Now he's got defenders that want to defend and are happy to defend in their penalty area and want to do the one-on-one defending, want to do the hard yards. And I think we all kind of mistake the glitz and glamour and the goals and the passing and stuff like that. But when you've got Guardiola focusing on how good his defenders have played and kind of signaling Kyle Walker and singling him out as this sort of superstar season he's had, and talking about Nathan Ake, which is a bit of a pain, but how good his centre backs have been, how good his full backs have been this season. That kind of, I guess, defensive quality that has underpinned how good they've been. It has to start there for us as well, and we have to look at it as getting in defenders who are great defenders first and foremost. And I think Badia Shield absolutely is that for me, and I think he is potentially to be a bedrock of this side for the future.
How both him and Wes aren't 100% keep on our poll is a little shocking to me personally.
Yeah.
Like Wes at 97%, Batty Shield at 98% if you round up. Obviously, like
Chaos
both of
Age
these
is
guys
sick.
both these guys are just the future, right? Along with the next option on our list. And I think Batty Shield has the possibility to do some really great things at Chelsea. So I'm very, very excited for him.
All right. Well, to pull the rug under Nick, the next one is now Cucurella. What did you say about him? No, I'm just kidding, because you said you're excited about the next one. We do have Levi Colwill. So, squad composition, what's important, guys? It was left or right-footed. We had Rudiger at the left center back for a long time. It changed the passing angles. He made up with it with his bite and his shenanigans, but Colwill has 96% keep. How do you fit him in, Nick? Where does he go?
I think this is probably the biggest question of the entire squad for me is how do you play both Badiashile and Colwill if you're really excited about both of them? And I don't know. I really don't. I don't know how you do it unless you're playing a 3 with Badiashile in the middle who might be the more complete passer at this point in time. And you have Levi kind of flanking him on the left and Wes on the right. I mean, I think that's really, Joe, the only way that I could see that happening where both of them are getting adequate playing time. I think it is probably the biggest question in the squad right now.
It's an interesting one because you're quite used to seeing a back four that's got two right-footed players playing on both sides. JT obviously famously played on the left-hand side despite, well, technically two-footed, but dominant foot being right-footed. I can't remember, and it might be an interesting question to fans if anybody can recall a back four that had two left-footed centre backs starting like the majority of games. That would be an interesting question, but I think they can both play there. I mean, I still look at this squad and the way it's composed, and I think the way to get the best out of the players we have, I think a back three is probably still the way to do that. And whether Levi or Badiashile with that middle centre back, I guess it'll be just a question for Pochettino. But I guess that is my kind of default answer. And then I suppose Fofana has had his kind of injury issues. They're not necessarily. He seems to get big sort of injuries. They're not kind of kind of recurring muscular things or whatever it might be. So I think in that respect, you may be sort of looking at the possibility of Badiashile and Colwill playing in a back four, which would be very interesting to see two lefties play back there. But back three would be my answer. I think having those three at centre back gives you almost a perfect blend of like three just completely modern centre backs, comfortable on the ball, different skill sets. Some can drive, some are passers. All three are very good defenders. And as a platform then to build on the rest of the team, I think that gives you a great foundation. So I would maybe be erring on the side of a back three. Pochettino has played it. He has played it numerous times, certainly with Spurs, and has had success with the formation. But I think to your point there, it's going to be, you might be in a situation where we have one of these kind of incredible trio of young centre-backs who is sitting on the bench, and maybe even more if somebody like Koulibaly is kept around. So, Brighton very clearly want him. I think any Premier League side who wants a centre-back would buy Levi Colwill at this point in time as well. So, we have to manage that situation. He's not a player that I think we can afford to lose. I do think his ceiling is the sort of upper echelons of Premier League centre-back. So you can't lose a player of that quality just because you can't figure out how you fit him in. I think he's that good that I think you have to figure out how you fit him and Badiashile and Fofana possibly into the same team.
The one interesting thing that we've seen the past couple of days, so we're recording this at the start of the transfer window, which is where we can get a little bit of understanding what the player's future might look like. We've seen Chelsea being interested in Moises Caicedo. We've seen potentially a loan back to Brighton as an option. So just with the other logjam, like I definitely am in a keep situation, but you could also envision a world where we say, cool, let's get Levi on loan for one more season. Let's get a lower price deal on a player that we think is really interesting. Like, again, I think you're laughing a little bit at it, Brandon, but I just, this may be a way forward if we can't move on some other players too. Because it's just domino effects of bad deals.
I promise I'm not laughing at you. I was just laughing that we would loan Levi Colwill so he could play in Europe while we didn't.
We might want him to get the experience.
That's what I'm saying. Him at Brighton might actually be a better option than him staying at Chelsea this season.
I could see that being a serviceable thing if it knocks your if you're really desperate to get Caicedo, and I don't know, we're not on the board, right? So we don't know who they're after, if it's Ugarte or if it's Caicedo or if it's anyone.
Or everyone.
Basically every midfielder in Europe, yeah. But I do think that is an interesting one if it knocks a hefty amount off of a potential transfer fee and everyone gets playing time. Like, I could see that happening too. But
the preference is to keep him. The preference is to keep him.
Correct.
From all of us.
And I think every manager would always say, I want this selection problem, right? Maybe this like brings the best out of him, Batty Shield, they'll figure it out. Trevoh Chalobah, guys, this is where I'm absolutely stuck. 64% of the poll said keep, 32% said sell. At this point, I think it's the stick or twist. You have to decide. My problem is when I look at squad composition, if Wes is definitely going to play on the right side, and if it's a back four or not, but either way, it's like Trevoh or Silva for me in my squad, especially if Levi's there. We can't have 6 center backs, especially if there's only 2 spots. This breaks my heart. I don't know what to do. Trevoh gives you, because if Gusto comes in, you don't need him on the right side anymore. You've got that depth. His flexibility between sessions was his strength, Joe. So I think this is decision time for Trevoh. I think he almost left at least on loan last summer and ended up staying at the last second. So this isn't the first time they've had this conversation.
It's a tricky one because he's almost a perfect squad player in that I trust him to play the majority of games we're playing. I think he's certainly in the first choice 11. You can slot him in at centre back or wherever. I'm more than comfortable. And I think certainly his versatility towards the end of the year, sort of deputising at wing back and all those kind of qualities he has, I think he is the perfect person that you want to keep around. Again, I look at how Pochettino has used kind of, I guess, multi-dimensional defenders in the past and moved them into sort of midfield. And again, I guess the question for me is, if we're looking for just a very physical ball winner in midfield, is that something, that he continues from some of the stuff he was doing in France? Does he look at him as a potential partner to a Fernandes if, a Caicedo or somebody like that is unavailable, or somebody of that kind of ilk? I would love to keep him. I think, if you're keeping 4 centre backs, and it would be a very young group, it would be, Trevoh, Wesley, Benoit, and Levi as your sort of 4 centre backs, with potentially Chalobah being a possible midfield deputy. I would love to keep him around, but it's very difficult. And I think it's something that Phil always mentions on podcasts, is that, the idea of using academy players as squad players is fantastic, but a lot of them want to go and have careers. A lot of them want to go and start regularly. Look at like Mark Gurhey and others who have maybe left, who probably, we would have liked them to stuck around and been squad players and been that kind of talent. But eventually there comes a decision point where they want to go and play. And I think Chalobah is definitely a Premier League standard player, and he will go and have an incredible career, probably at a team at the moment that are probably above Chelsea in the league. So tough one. I would like to keep him, but I think it comes down to whether he is happy with being the kind of the fourth choice as a centre back, and maybe as a rotational piece, either out wide or sort of as a sort of pure number 6. But it's a tricky selling point to him as well to be happy with that. But that's the difficulties of forming a squad, unfortunately. But I would love to keep him.
It's a numbers game, right?
Absolutely.
If you're going to play a back 5, which we don't know what Poch is going to do yet, then you have to carry around extra center backs. And then that's, I think Trev here. I still think that Trev could be a starter, by the way. Not that anyone cares about that these days, but I really do. If you play a back 4, the numbers become harder, right? And playing time becomes harder. He's deputized at right back. Part of the math here too, Brandon, for me, is like how many of our players get injured next year. Of course, the fitness thing is going to be a primary concern. Less games, hopefully less wear and tear. But do you carry him around as an insurance policy? I might, and that's why I want to keep him.
Yeah, which is the problem with the player window. He's 24, so he's starting to get into that peak time. Because I'm like, you think he'd stay another year because it's a new manager and feel it out? I bet he's getting itchy to kind of like have an established role on a team, so he can play the next 6 seasons in his peak part of his career. We'll have to see. This is where it gets really tough, right? Managers and directors to figure out what do you do with a promising player who's done nothing wrong, always been there to fill in for the team wherever he goes. An easy one though, Dan, is Benjamin Chilwell, right? Spotted at the F1 series, killing it up. 94% said keep.
Like almost every Chelsea player, even Chelsea players who just got off loan and are going back to their team, like Joao Felix, are also showing up at the F1 event this weekend, and events because there's a race and there are also a lot of things around it. This is a 94% of people said keep. Those are people that we all agree with because we agree that he should be kept. We agree that he should be starting. We agree that it was a smart decision to shut him down for meaningless games at the end of the season because we want him wonderfully healthy to tackle the upcoming season because, boy, oh boy, we missed goal and assist contributions coming from our left-sided defender. So this is a really, really easy one. I think the next one, though, is much more difficult, more from a how do we get out of this situation we find ourselves in.
Cucurella. We talked about Brighton, Levi Colwell. You think back to his loan originally, Nick.
Refund fee?
We paid extra for Cucurella so that Levi Colwell had no buy clause or that it wasn't a sell, it was just a loan. Man City wanted him, right? It was apparently us and City going for this player. He's had some ups. He's had some downs. For whatever reason, like when we've seen Lewis Hall come in, the fact that we've got Ian Matson potentially in the wings, he has flex between left center back and left wing back, so there's a little bit of flexibility there. But all of us say sell, and 71.5% of the poll said sell as well. I feel like this isn't his fault. It just didn't click.
Part of it's his fault.
Well,
Some of these performances have not been good enough, but I will say it's just, I don't think an upper echelon Premier League player with the physicality and discipline required against even your bottom of the table teams, will have speed. He left enormous gaps all season for the left-sided center back to clean up. And when you watch Lewis Hall play that position in the last 6 or 7 games of the season, Joe, it just reinforced for me that this is a player you have to try and move on. I think this was Bowley's biggest blunder over the offseason, not Koulibaly. I think this was misguided, even though I think there was a lot of murmuring about how great he would be in Chelsea. It just is not going to work. And so I would sell.
Bowley's biggest blunder taking over from the Triple B on this podcast, of course, in terms of prescient Chelsea matters. £60 million. I mean, we have spent some money on rubbish. I say rubbish, it's a bit of a stretch there, on poor players or poor fit or whatever you want to talk about there. But there is nothing I've seen this season from Cucurella, either as a left back, as a wing back, as a left-sided centre back, or whatever it is going to be, that to me suggests that he is anywhere near worth the fee that we've paid for him, probably the wages that he's on, but that there is a player who is going to help Chelsea and I guess, in terms of where we are looking to be next season, back competing with top 4 teams. I've not seen anything to suggest that is going to happen now. He may miraculously turn things around in his second season, but I would much rather look at somebody like Lewis Hall, who I think outperformed him, potentially somebody like Ian Matson, who I know we're going to speak about in a second, but giving those players the opportunities that Cucurella is going to take, then see another season of him just be very, very below average and have the occasional decent game. I'm not suggesting he was poor in every single outing, but for the money, for the investment, for what we were supposed to be getting, this player that we were supposed to be getting from Brighton, the reality was that he was maybe like a 1 in 10 player in terms of performances, and that's possibly being kind. But yeah, if there was an opportunity to move him on, again, same issue we have with all of these players is that they have just joined, they've got enormous contracts. There's tons of money left on the book for them to move on. I would sell personally, but I think a loan elsewhere might be the most sensible option for him in terms of moving him away, letting him sort of recompose himself and restart his career, and then let Chelsea sort of go in a different direction.
Well, restart, pivot. Like I said, the wages again, guys.
Yep.
The contract, the wages. Can we back out of this Bowley deal? Again, the Sterling, the Koulibaly, the Cucurella. Thankfully, I think we're only interested in getting out of 2 of those 3, but it's going to be really, really hard. Lewis Hall, next one up. 86% said keep. You guys all saying keep. I said loan. Tweeds, your comment earlier about squad composition, the fact that he's actually center mid for Dev squad, can also cover at left back. I think between him and the next player up is going to be where it kicks off. But I mean, he's 18 as well, Dan. He's young. He still wants a lot of minutes. He's just been playing Dev squad. He's looked good in the last 2 seasons we played him. There's no credit around him. I just don't know kind of where he fits in this team, if it is as simple as playing behind Chilwell, even though he's technically more of a traditional center mid.
Yeah, my thought actually, I had keep for him, but I almost think he becomes like a rotational midfielder in this side over the course of the season. Like the next person we talk about, that's the person I would effectively like to keep as the Cucurella, or that move on Cucurella, make this person we talk about next the actual backup to Chilwell, and allow Lewis Hall to be a midfield depth in the way that like Ruben was this past season, where you have enough minutes for him and an ability to get him into Pochettino's system, get him to learn. I think we talked about that. Like, linear development is not the way it happens, right? Like, there's a need to incubate some of the understanding about how you want your team to play, how you want your players to go about it. And like, if we do what we need to do this coming season, we'll go from playing mid 40s in terms of numbers of games to potentially high 50s in numbers of games season over season. And you have to have some level of institutional knowledge, some level of academy promotes through that train. And if we're losing some of the players we think we're going to be losing, it'd be a great one to keep around.
I love his flexibility. I think he could play both roles really well. He stayed fit all year, which is helpful. And I think at the end of the season, we got to see that his service delivery is something that isn't to be trifled with. And assuming that you have any competent center forward available to head a ball into the net, he's a valuable asset to keep around, and he doesn't cost you anything. So he's there. Boom.
Ian Monson's next. Tweeds, 57% said keep, 17% said sell, 26% said loan. He had an amazing season for Burnley with Company's side there as they rolled the championship. What do you do with him? I mean, we talk about this left side. The biggest problem right now is Cucurella could be the blocker to Ian Matson coming in, which sucks.
39 matches played, 3,200, almost 3,300 minutes, 4 goals, 6 assists from left back.
Player of the Month awards, like
a big time player in the championship, Joe.
I think this is going to be probably the first kind of testing of the new structure, because, and I love that this is something that Phil always says, that we always ask these players to go away and accrue experience and develop and build. And Matson was at Coventry, like League One, and now he's done it in the Championship, and it's the next step, isn't it? Is okay, so you've done everything that we've asked of you. You have clearly outperformed. You've been one of the best players in the Championship. You've had a Reece James kind of season. You've had a Mason Mount kind of season in terms of the Championship. Do you now get your opportunity at Chelsea, or is it another loan is now required? And in the face of some players who have massively and drastically underperformed, and to another point, Ben Chilwell hasn't necessarily been the most available of players, which is, again, sort of something that is problematic for that left-hand side, and probably why Lewis Hall has had to feature so much. Matson is available, and I know, Nick, something you always talk about is availability is probably one of the best qualities in a player. He is a very durable, very tough young man. I would give him his opportunity this season, and I have a fear that I think the club will probably try to sell him. He is a saleable asset. He has tons of quality. Burnley, no doubt, and probably many other teams in that kind of mid portion of the league, even potentially ones who are flirting with a bit of Europa League or Conference, will be looking at Matson as a player who has an enormous future ahead of him. I would like to see us keep him, because I do think there will be points this season where he will be the number one player in that position. And I think that you will need his quality at times to get us through a period of games where Chilwell is out or Cucurella's form has dipped or whatever it might be. But I would certainly be looking to keep him around, because I think he's done everything you've asked of him on loan, and now you have to reward him by giving him the opportunity at his parent club.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And if Chilwell's not available, as he hasn't been for much of his career at Chelsea, and that's just being honest about the situation. Him and Reece are injury liabilities, right?
Yeah.
To have competent backups like Malo Gusto, we hope will be for Reece, to have Maatsen as this available player where there isn't a significant drop off between the two. God, what a godsend that would be. If Chilwell goes down again, then you have someone who's ready, and then Hall can slot in where required, Dan. So this is one that I think I agree with Joe. I think the club will probably try and sell him. There's already been some briefing out there that's going to be allowed to happen, but I think it would be silly.
Went from 3 goals at Coventry City and 1 assist to 4 goals for Burnley and 6 assists, so 4 goal contributions to 10 goal contributions season over season. That would actually mean that in English football, even though the Premier League is a little bit different, he has captured more than Marc Cucurella, who would be the second choice currently, just based upon positional depth charts. So, yeah, this is an easy one for me, but maybe not so easy due to other situations we find ourselves in, Brandon.
Joe said it at the very beginning. This will be the biggest test for the club. To me, long-term, Chelsea youth academy product, like, stick to your principles, stick to your morals, like, pivot on the one. Ian Maatsen, if he goes, we will look back and just be like, this was dumb. Just like even when Tino Livramento went Southampton, tore it up before his knee injury. This is carbon copy. We've seen this happen before. Do not mess this up.
Naz just getting a briefing in 20 seconds ago. Chelsea will demand excess of £20 million to sell Ian Maatsen. Burnley interested in keeping hold of him. So
yeah, I bet they are 20 million.
Yep.
Like, not worth it.
In Premier League terms, like, that's chump change, right? Yeah. Like, he's a better player than 20 million.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that wraps up the defenders. A lot in there. We actually probably our biggest section down. So thank you for surviving that